Welcome to Reimagining Retirement, and today we are interviewing Reverend Dr. Amy Davis Abdallah. She works as a professor, a writer, a speaker, a ritual creator. She believes rituals are transformative and powerful, so she wrote Meaning in the Moment: How Rituals Help Us Move Through Joy, Pain, and Everything in Between. Amy is a founder and director of Woman, a rite of passage program, and authored the Book of Womanhood to empower women to be their true selves in the world. That book also sounds good. I haven't read it though.
I like it.
Yeah. Her writing has been featured in Everbloom, The Wonder Years, and by Christianity Today, CBE International, Redbud Writers Guild, InterVarsity Fellowship, and Missio Alliance. So welcome, Amy. I'm so thankful that you are here to discuss rituals and how they can help us in the retirement process.
Well, thanks for having me, Judy. It's really a pleasure to be with you and with your audience.
Thank you. Um, so I read Reading Meaning in the Moment a couple months ago, and I recently reread it and just was struck again with how much rituals could help us in the retirement process. And there's so much in this book, and we're not going to be able to cover a fraction of it. But let's begin with just a definition of retirement. How would you define retirement ritual?
Well,
I
gosh,
know
I'm
what
glad you changed
retirement
that
is.
one because I'm not sure I can define retirement right now. I mean, I think
Yeah,
we
I'm
know,
not sure
but
anybody can.
yeah, it's so complex. It really is. So I try to go with a kind of a short definition of rituals. It's the one I'm going to use right now. There's one that I use in my book, and then I got a ritual, or a definition from Drew Johnson, who wrote another book on rituals. And he says it's something scripted and something done. When he says scripted, it doesn't mean that you've written a script. It just means that someone has planned something. And so whether it's you or a larger person in greater authority or an institution that plans something, it's something scripted and it's something done. That's kind of the real simplest definition of ritual. But for our purposes, I really like Teresa Rando's definition, and I'm going to go ahead and read it. I use it in the book. And I say, she writes, a ritual is a specific behavior or activity that gives symbolic expression. So symbolic expression is really key to certain feelings, thoughts of the actor or actors. So it can be communal, individually or as a group. It may be habitually repeated or a one-time occurrence. So just like it's something that you do that gives symbolic expression. And so like there's a lot of things that happen to us in a sense internally that you get married, that's external and internal, but you're giving symbolic expression to that union.
Right.
And in a wedding ceremony, I'm going to suggest ritual, so you can use either term, they're often used interchangeably. You have that outward expression and symbolic expression of an action that you are doing. And it also expresses thoughts and feelings. So there's this outward expression, and it can happen multiple times, or it can only happen once. And it tends to be very meaningful for the actor or actors that are participating.
Okay, interesting. So it can be a group or an individual or just a couple people. It doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter. I do a lot of rituals individually, personally. I recently went through a long time of underemployment. I had lost my full-time job, was doing a lot of little things, and then recently came into full-time employment. And every time I would send my applications into what I call the internet abyss, and I guess that maybe this isn't the right thing to talk about when you're talking about retirement. But I would hold my hands right here because it feels like you're giving all your heart away when you do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And I would throw my hands out and I
Mm,
would say, God, do your thing. And so, like, that's just a super duper simple ritual
right.
that helped me deal with the emotional and
Yeah.
psychological aspects
Yeah.
of the action that I was taking. Super simple. So that's individual, but you can do it with friends. You can do it at church. You can do it with a small group. You can do it with your family. Like, there are multiple different times where we need help. I think rituals
Mhm.
help. Not I think. Like it's been proven that rituals help. They help alleviate anxiety. They help us
Mhm.
process our emotions. They help in so many multiple ways. And so yeah, it can be individual or it can be as a group. Whatever you need for that moment in your life. They tend to be more effective when they're done with a group of people.
Okay. So yeah, thinking about rituals, common rituals that we all know about. I was thinking about graduations and weddings, baby showers, And they all seem to be focused on the beginning of life. And when we're starting careers and education and a marriage, and there isn't as many commonly accepted rituals for finishing well.
Yes.
So I know in your book you mentioned several rituals in the meantime, but how can rituals help us to finish well? Um,
Yeah,
and
that
what?
is a really, really great question. And I would agree that there are very few rituals that help us finish well. And I don't mean to be morbid, but as I was thinking through what you're talking about, particularly as we age, we, particularly in Western society, you know, in Eastern cultures, they honor and revere and
Yeah.
respect, and the elders tend to live longer than they do in Western society.
Mhm.
But in our society, we do worship youth, and we worship like these exciting, like it's like, oh,
Mhm.
exciting, like. But as we age, we're afraid of death. We don't do death well. That might be my next book. I'm actually talking to some publishers about how do we do death well. And as we move toward that, we think about degeneration. Forgive me if this is morbid, but we do think about degeneration,
Mhm.
and we don't know how to celebrate
Right.
degeneration,
Right.
because that's the only thing we think about. We don't
Mhm.
honor, we don't respect, we don't do that. And so with retirement and as we age, sure, there's degeneration, but there's also regeneration.
Mhm.
And but sometimes we only want to focus on regeneration. We don't think about the degeneration. So there's this ambivalence and this mix of which happens in all stages of life, but it's more clear as we age and as we go into retirement. How do we honor where we have been and honor where we are going? How do we honor what we have done and honor what we're doing and what we are not doing and possibly no longer able to do? Um, Rather than just letting these things happen to us, I think what ritual does is helps us process it, helps us give definition to it. And rituals help us find hope and community in all seasons of our lives. Because they're things, particularly when we do it with community. I mean, you can do them on your own, but when you do it with community, it helps you find that hope. One of the rituals that I came across, and this is not retirement, and I'm not trying to be morbid, but one of the rituals that I came across was a transition. This could be for anyone from fighting a disease to palliative care. So it was a chaplain had written this, and the whole point of as you go into palliative care, he was basically saying there are two ways you can go. You can go to despair or you can go to hope. How do we help people go to hope? And so the ritual itself was written by a Roman Catholic priest and chaplain, and it just kind of looked at bringing people who are going to help you along the season of your life. Like where are you going to find joy? How are you going to continue to do that? And we retire at different ages. You know, I was talking to a good friend of mine, he's 70, and I'm like, so have you thought about retiring? And he's like, retire and do what? You know, like there are these questions
Yeah.
that we do ask. And so some people retire early, but trying to figure out it's an undefined period of our lives.
Mhm.
And we want definition, we want boundaries, and we get to create those, and rituals help us
Right.
create those.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I think the fact that it's so undefined is an issue for many
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
because um, your career is defined, your family's defined, and all of a sudden, like, whoa, I can do whatever I want, or whatever I can, or both, and
Right.
it's awkward, and I don't. So how? Let's see. You wrote in the book. You wrote the most powerful rituals have the purpose of transformation during the ritual. Participants become different and then act differently in the world. And I think that's what retirees need. They need to understand that they're going to have to act differently. It's a major life transition, a whopper.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're going to have to act differently. So, what is it about rituals? I mean, you may have already answered this, but how can that affect how somebody feels about their own retirement, how they approach it, how they might think about the possibilities in this stage of life?
Yeah. You use the term retiree, and I'm thinking about how rituals name, you know,
Mhm.
a marriage ritual. You know, if you think about baptism, if you take on a saint's name, like rituals name things and they act, so they do things. And so you use the term retiree, but retiree is
Mm.
it's such a like broad name. And
Yeah.
so a ritual can help people name retiree who, you know, like a retiree who perhaps was and is, you know, like
Uh-huh.
what does that mean? So they help name and they help kind of define. The idea that you can do everything is whatever you want is what everyone is just like, oh wow, that's the best thing about retirement. And
Yeah.
that is the hardest thing, I'm sure, about retirement. I'm not currently retired, but I'm sure it is the hardest thing because you have to make choices. And
Right.
so you can create individual rituals that help you name different things and help you understand. It's a renegotiation of your identity. There are multiple different
Mhm.
times in our lives that where we renegotiate our identity. It's like we know who we are, but
Yeah.
who am I in this role? Who am I at this point?
Mhm.
Who am I here? So we can do things that help renegotiate our identity during that time. And here's the thing I'm thinking that is particularly interesting. Maybe interesting is not the right word, but perhaps even challenging about retirement is that you'll keep changing, you know, so that renegotiation continues to happen. When I've looked at retirement, you know, we have like retirement parties, and frankly, we rituals help. I have multiple friends who retired in 2020. And so when they retired from, and several of them are faculty members at an institution. So there are things that you do when you're about to retire as a faculty member. You have your last lecture, you have these honors, you go to graduation, and none of that happened. And so they have felt honestly pretty lost because they didn't get those ending rituals. And they're like, I never had that. So they've in that so ending well, like ending that period of your life well in all of the ways that you want to do so. We have retirement parties, but sometimes they're just a party. Like how
Right.
do you honor who you have been and what you have been
Right.
doing?
Right.
Figure out what you're going to take with you and enter into this liminal space. This you know, I've only done reading about this, and this liminal space where you're like, you're not who you were, you're not quite yet who you will be. And
Mhm.
it's liminality. Our whole life is liminal. I think you
Right.
just recognize it more during retirement.
Yeah.
So we're all in between negotiating different things at different times. But then how do you give yourself time to sabbatical? Like you, I think you
Mhm.
stated in one of, how do you give
Mhm.
yourself time to take time to rest, to figure out who you are right now and what you want to be, and and then even honor that. Like, this is who
Yeah.
I am right now. I wrote in my book on rituals of liminality. Like, so many of us are in liminal states. Like, I think retirement continues to be liminal, but you can make certain definitions. But like, chronic illness is a liminal state. Extended unemployment is a liminal state. How do we mark
Mhm.
spots in that liminal state where we say we aren't just stagnant? Because you aren't. You aren't. We're not just stagnant. We're not just doing nothing, even though it may feel like nothing. Rituals help us mark that, help us mark who we are and where we are as we continue on in the process of retirement or even of life. I think we see it more in retirement, but I think it actually we just ignore it for the rest of life. And I think retirees have this unique opportunity to pay attention to it, so that you can mark it. And in fact, I think we could learn a lot. Those of us who are not retired can learn a lot from retirees as you continue to negotiate that, because we're still negotiating it. We're just not paying attention. And
Yeah.
the more you pay attention um, to these different seasons of life, the more deeply you will experience them. And I think there'll be more positive feelings about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about your thoughts on the liminality. And you talk a lot in the book about a three-stage process, an end, a middle, and a beginning. And um, you mentioned that you every beginning has to follow an end. So it's circular. And in the
Mhm.
middle, it's this liminality, I think, that retirees, people who are retired, trying to figure out retirement,
Mhm.
are struggling with because they're not sure. They know who they were, but they're
Mhm.
not sure who they're going to be.
Mhm.
So, yeah, do you have any more thoughts on beginnings, middles, and ends?
Yeah, they're very significant. I think we, like you stated, we're always celebrating beginnings.
Mhm.
We have all these great beginnings early on in our lives. We're not good at ends. Like I stated earlier, we don't like death and we don't like, I mean, no one likes death. I'm not saying you should like death,
Yeah,
but we try to ignore it as much as we
yeah,
can. We act like it doesn't exist. We
right.
we we try to avoid it. And not only do we avoid physical death and thoughts of physical death, but we also avoid metaphorical death. And the ending of a career is a metaphorical
Yeah,
death, and we want to avoid that as much as we can. I mean, not in some senses we celebrate it. We did well, but we don't do ends well. I've spent a lot of time in other cultures, and one of the things that I notice in the other cultures is that you say hello, you kind of say hello to everybody, it's easy. But when you're about to leave a situation, you're going to say goodbye to everyone that you talked to, and you do all of this. And so, like you, even saying goodbye is part of an ending. So there's all of this, okay, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone and then I'm going to leave. And so when I'm in Western culture and I'm at a party and I'm like, oh, that person left without saying goodbye. I don't understand that any longer.
yeah.
We
Interesting.
in Western culture don't even say goodbye well. We just take off. We're like, okay, we're just gonna go. And I don't know if that's just my experience, but how do we say goodbye well? How do we end well? We're not good at ends. Because we're only looking at youth and looking at growth. But then there's also that in-between stage, the liminal stage is the is it's our life. We're in between birth and death. But there's so much ambivalence. There's so much anxiety. There's so many feelings that we say are negative. But if you look at any emotions researchers, they're going to say, we don't call them negative or positive. Every feeling that you have is a signal to you to have you pay attention and help you understand what's going on. And so, but they don't feel good. And so we try to avoid it in every way we can. And rituals actually help us process those when you have time to go and to process. And so we have these endings, you enter into liminal space. I think the challenge, and I mean, those are how rites of passage were always done. If you think about it as adolescence,
Yeah,
you're no longer a girl or a boy, but you're not yet a man or a woman. And so you're in this stage of adolescence. And no, none of us look at adolescence and say, gosh, I wish I could go back to that. It'd be
yeah,
so
yeah.
much fun. But we're glad we moved through. I think one of the challenges with retirement in particular is that you can mark certain spots even after you retire. And I think that would be very healthy, be a ritual, but then you're gonna keep doing it. And the truth is that's the way all of life is.
Mhm.
It's just more obvious in
Right,
retirement.
right. Yeah,
And so I think for retirement, we need to be able to say goodbye well. You need to have those parties, and you need to have those parties and have some kind of aspect to it that celebrates and honors who
mhm.
you were during that time period. But then I also think you need to figure out what are you going to bring with you? Because
Yeah,
yes, you're no longer like when I retire, I'm no longer going to be a professor. Like that's not going to be what I'm doing all the time, but I'm still going to teach. Like there's
right,
so much that you bring with you into
right,
this next phase. It's just transformed into something different.
right.
And our ability to be open to the ambiguity of that is going to determine our resilience.
Mhm.
And we have to, rituals help us define, but rituals can also say, I'm open to this ambiguity. This is different from retirement, but we're moving. So in on the 21st of this month, I'm going to move and we're moving into a new place. And because I got a job, and when we go there, we're going to be in temporary housing for a while. And for a while, we didn't know if we were going to be in a two-bedroom apartment or in a four-bedroom house. And, I've got two small children, and we're like, okay, well, I'd love to be in the four-bedroom house. But for me, I had to sit and take really deep breaths and just say, wherever we are is going to be part of the adventure. Because I can handle ambiguity if I'm calling it an adventure,
Right.
but I don't handle ambiguity if
Yeah.
I'm calling it life. So like when I'm on vacation, I'm just like, oh, I love this. I
Mhm.
deal with all of that stuff. And so if we can redefine those periods of liminality as an adventure, at least for me, I've found over the last several months that helps me. It's like, okay, it's part of the adventure.
Mhm.
I'm okay with that. And to even view your retirement journey as an adventure
Yeah, yeah.
and to even say, okay, I'm entering into this adventure of retirement casts a really positive
Mhm.
feeling on what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, Judy, I really hope that my retirement is an adventure.
Yeah.
because you're dealing with new things, and not all of them are necessarily the best, but that's what happens when you're on an adventure.
Yeah. And that's what happens in life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You just,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
you just get to see it more when you
Yeah.
retire
No.
because there's a little bit more space for that
Yeah.
and there's less definition.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. And looking at it as an adventure, opportunities, that's so much more fun than, oh, what am I going to do today?
Hmm.
It's just a different mindset. So I don't know if it sounds like maybe rituals should be sort of personalized. Is there a common ritual that you can recommend for retirement? What do you think? You, I looked
I
through your
think
book for examples of rituals on retirement. I thought, there isn't one.
there isn't. And I think because I haven't experienced that personally, it's far easier for me to write a
Yeah,
ritual for something that I've
yeah,
experienced personally or close friends have experienced,
right.
although I would say that close friends and family members have retired. Um, there isn't a universally recognized ritual. But again, I'm saying maybe it's not just one, maybe there are multiple
Yeah,
ones.
yeah,
I read that you wrote, I saw the ritual that you wrote, which I thought
yeah,
was fantastic. You had multiple different parts of that. People brought something from where they
right.
were, kind of let it go. The only thing that I would want to add to that ritual is that you want to be careful about getting rid of things because I think those things you carry on with you, but they're
Yeah,
transformed into something different.
yeah,
So maybe there's like if you're a doctor and you have this stethoscope and you walk in with it around your neck, but maybe you change it into something different and then it goes on your shelf as some kind of sculpture or something. And so there's got to be something that honors where you've been and honors who you are and who that has made you to be. I mean, I would say that it is, I think retirement, this is just a new idea I just had. I think retirement might be easier if we don't define ourselves by our vocation, by our jobs.
yes,
You
absolutely
know,
cool. Yeah,
if that's not our identity, and I think going through a period of extended unemployment was helpful to me, and I have this journal where I would write at the top of the journal every day before I got my job was that it was this literally, I am still good and valuable even without a full-time job.
yeah,
To be able to say that to myself was significant, but to have some kind of symbol that transforms that element. Yes, I would say that they're personalized because we're all, but I also think that they can be communal. So or kind of patterned. So I think the personalized application would be in certain parts of the ritual, but I do think that friend groups or churches or small groups can create something that is patterned. And that pattern, I mean, if you see, here's the thing. You want, before you're retired, you want to see your friends walk through this retirement ritual and say,
yeah,
"Oh, I want that."
yeah,
You want so when it becomes
yes,
patterned in
yeah,
a subculture or community, then it becomes helpful because it becomes part of this fabric of your subculture. And so, if there's some kind of pattern of honoring who you are, recognizing, hey, this is a real change, and then symbolically showing that and then blessing. I mean, that's the simplest kind of thing you can do. And that was kind of the pattern that your ritual followed. Like you have to, one of the things that I do say in the ending rituals is you've got to figure out what you're finishing. I talk about my sabbatical ending ritual and I talk about, okay, I'm saying, okay, this is what I'm getting rid of or not getting rid of. This is what was great and I'm not going to have anymore. But
right.
this is what was great and I'm bringing with me. And figuring out how to move forward into this next season of your life. And I mean, I do think also, what happens because are you welcomed by the people who are already retired? We're so happy you're one of us now.
Yeah,
Is there a group that you continue with and follow with? Say, okay, we got another one of you. This is awesome. Let's do this
yeah,
together.
yeah,
Because I'm just guessing at this, but I imagine that because retirement is so individual, that there's a lot of loneliness that happens, even if you're living in a retirement community. There are
mhm,
certain things that we only walk through alone, even if we have a spouse.
right, right. Yeah, that's a really good point to transition the objects or the reminders of who you were, what you did, but now they're going to serve a different purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And a transformed and very good purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Great information. Is there anything else? Um, and I also like what you said about um, becoming a part of the fabric of the community. If people see a retirement ritual and see somebody handling retirement well, they'll be more likely to want to participate in a similar ritual. So
Yeah,
that's
and
good to know.
yeah, and I think one of the things is that if you do a ritual, like a lot of people do retirement, well, I don't know. I imagine people do retirement well, but it's not something that is honored and kind of publicized in a sense. There's again an individual nature to that, and I don't know that people talk about it that much. Like how are you doing in the retirement? So the ritual also brings what's inside of individuals and helps it be out and shared with community, which I think is an incredibly strong aspect of what rituals do for
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And the only thing I would love to have people buy my book, primarily because I think these things help us
yeah,
become better people and walk our journey well as we continue. So,
yes, yes. I agree. Everybody buy this book. It's useful. It's well written, and I really enjoyed it.
thank you,
So
Judy.
thank you so much, Amy, for talking with us. And you've given me a lot to think about. And I hope that everybody watching feels the same.
Thank you. So good to be with you.
Thank, thank you, Amy. And best of luck in your
Thank
move.
you.
I,
Thank you.
okay, bye bye.